Sharon A. Carver. William E. Caswell. Sergeant First Class John J. Chada, United States Army, retired. Rosa Maria Chapa.
Sounds from the Pentagon today as the nation marks the 22nd anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. Welcome to Washington today. Thank you for joining us. In New York City, citywide moments of silence marked the exact moments that American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 175 struck the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center on the morning of September 11th, 2001. That was followed by the annual name reading at the 9/11 Memorial Plaza in Lower Manhattan. Vice President Kamala Harris and former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani were among the attendees at that ceremony. Here in Washington, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair General Mark Milley appeared at the Pentagon ceremony, where American Airlines Flight 77 struck the southwest corner of the building, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, a ceremony honoring the passengers and crew who died on United Flight 93. At each ceremony, the names of those who perished were read and bells of remembrance rung in their memory. We begin at the Pentagon and Defense Secretary Austin.
To the families and the loved ones of the 184 people who lost their lives on 9/11, here at the Pentagon and on Flight 77, let me extend my deepest condolences on behalf of the Department of Defense. I know that being here is hard. I know that it aches to remember this milestone year after year. And I know that nothing can make it right. And as the years go by, it may feel that the world is moving on or even forgetting what happened here on September 11th, 2001. But please know this. The men and women of the Department of Defense will always remember. And we will always honor the memory of our fallen teammates. And we will always strive to be worthy of the memory of those we lost. September 11th reminds us that the American spirit still shines in times of testing. After the attacks, amid the horror and the grief, many Americans felt a deeper sense of duty to their communities and to their country. And all around the country, with hearts breaking for the slain and the suffering, Americans looked within themselves and felt called to give back. In those terrible first hours and days, people rushed to give blood, to volunteer in hospitals, or to hand out food and water to exhausted first responders. And here at the Pentagon, an outstanding group of employees and volunteers got a family assistance center up and running in less than a day. And over the next month, over 2,500 people volunteered there. And so they worked long hours to serve hot meals and provide counseling and offer medical care and help families through their grief. You know, not every act of service was monumental. We remember a hug for a soldier on the streets of Manhattan, or a child's handwritten thank you card for a firefighter. But every act of grace changed us, drawing out a strength and a sense of common purpose that became part of the story of that day and part of the story of our country. As the months and years went by, many Americans chose to help those in need or to fortify our security in a newly uncertain world. September 11th made America a nation at war. And hundreds of thousands stepped up to serve our country in uniform. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have come to a close. But we remain relentlessly focused on combating terrorist threats to America. And I want to thank all of my fellow veterans who served in combat during 2 hard decades of war after 9/11, as well as their families for all that they gave.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin speaking at the Pentagon earlier today.
Lorraine G. Bay. Todd M. Beamer.
And that was the sound in Shanksville, Pennsylvania earlier today, where 40 passengers and crew members were killed when their hijacked plane crashed into a field 22 years ago this morning. Among the attendees of that ceremony, Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, FBI Director Christopher Wray, and Rabbi Jeffrey Myers from the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the souls of all of our beloved we remember this day who have gone to their eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved ones find perfect peace in your tender embrace, their memory enduring as inspiration for commitment to their ideals and integrity in our lives. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life. May they always rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
And today's remembrances started in New York City at the 9/11 Memorial Plaza in Lower Manhattan.
Right, quick, march.
Then a reading of the nearly 3,000 people who died on 9/11.
Joseph Angelini, Sr.
Joseph John Angelini, Jr.
David Lawrence Angel.
Mary Lynn Edwards Angel.
Laura Angeletta.
Doreen J. Angersani.
Lorraine Antigua.
Sema David Aoyama.
And my father, firefighter Jonathan Lee Ielpi. Our family misses you every day, and we miss you very much. May you rest in peace.
And for my uncle, firefighter Jimmy Richards, tomorrow would have been your 52nd birthday. And even though I never got to meet you, I will never forget you. My sisters, cousins, and I are so proud of you. We love you forever. Happy birthday, Uncle Jimmy. God bless America.
Part of the name reading at Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan today. President Biden is in Alaska on his way back from the G20 summit. He spoke to 1,000 first responders and their families at a ceremony at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage.
I join you on this solemn day to renew our sacred vow. Never forget. Never forget. We never forget. Each of us, each of those precious lives stolen too soon when evil attacked. Ground Zero in New York, and I remember standing there the next day and looking at the building. I felt like I was looking through the gates of hell. It looked so devastating because from where you could stand. Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the Pentagon in Virginia. I spent many 9/11s in those hallowed grounds to bear witness and remember those we lost. Every day, but especially the last few days, their memory has been with me. I'm just returning from the G20 summit in India, where we strengthened America's leadership on the global stage, followed by a historic trip to Vietnam, where we transformed our partnership in one of the most critical regions in the world. These trips are an essential part of how we're going to ensure the United States is flanked by the broadest array of allies and partners who will stand with us and deter any threat to our security. To build a world that is safer for all of our children, something that today of all days we're reminded of is not a given. Because through this military base is located on ground zero, we know the distance did not dull or diminish the pain we felt all across the nation of September 11th. Because we know that on this day 22 years ago from this base, we're scrambled in high alert to escort planes through the airspace. Alaskan communities opened their doors to stranded passengers. American flags sold out in every store and were placed in front of seemingly every home. We know that on this day, every American's heart was wounded, yet every big city, small town, suburb, rural town, tribal community, American hands went up, ready to help where they could, ready to serve like so many of you here, ready like Chief Master Sergeant Shady Traylor, here with us today, who had recently started college when Flight 93 went down a few miles from Shanksville. She said, and I quote, "I immediately knew I wanted to sign up and suit up to serve my country." Ready like General Eifler, who said on that day, "When our nation calls, we must be ready." It called, and we went without hesitation. My fellow Americans, September 11th, 2001, tested our strength, our resolve, and our courage. The billowing smoke and ash that darkened the clear blue sky that September day. The shredded steel and concrete slabs that rained down from the World Trade Center. The plume of fire that shot up in the sky in Pentagon. I remember seeing as I got off the Amtrak train on my way to work in the United States Senate. The pit into the earth in Shanksville, a testament to the unbreakable courage and resolve of the American people. But we'll never forget that when faced with evil and an enemy who sought to tear us apart, we endured. We endured.
This is not the first time that a president has been absent from the observances at any of the three traditional 9/11 memorial sites. Back in 2015, President Obama held a moment of silence on the White House lawn before visiting service members at Fort Meade, Maryland. And in 2005, President George W. Bush held an observance on the White House lawn. And over the weekend, the word that the New York City Medical Examiner's Office has identified two more people who died at the World Trade Center on 9/11. The victims, a man and a woman, become the 1,648th and 49th individuals identified using advanced DNA testing by the city's medical examiner. Their names are being withheld at the request of their family. New York City Mayor Eric Adams told NBC New York, quote, "We hope these new identifications can bring some measure of comfort to the families of these victims, and the ongoing efforts by the Office of Chief Medical Examiner attest to the city's unwavering commitment to reunite all the World Trade Center victims with their loved ones." You can see all of today's events in New York, the Pentagon, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and the president's comments in Alaska at cspan.org and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. You're listening to Washington Today.
This fall, watch C-SPAN's new series, Books That Shaped America. Join us as we embark on a captivating journey in partnership with the Library of Congress, which first created a Books That Shaped America list to explore key works of literature from American history. The 10 books featured in our series have provoked thought, won awards, led to significant societal changes, and are still talked about today. Hear from featured renowned experts who will shed light on the profound impact of these iconic works, and virtual journeys to significant locations across the country intricately tied to these celebrated authors and their unforgettable books. Among our featured books, Common Sense by Thomas Paine, Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, and Free to Choose by Milton and Rose Friedman. Watch our 10-part series, Books That Shaped America, starting Monday, September 18th at 9 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, our free mobile video app, or online at cspan.org.
Welcome back to Washington Today. The Food and Drug Administration has approved a new round of COVID-19 vaccinations. The vaccines from Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna were approved for people 12 years of age and older and under an emergency use order for kids 6 months to 11 years old. An advisory panel at the Center for Disease Control is expected to meet tomorrow to discuss who should get the new shots. Following their decision, millions of doses will be shipped to pharmacies, clinics, and health systems nationwide. Authorities in Morocco are reporting a rising death toll from last Friday's earthquake. More than 2,600 people have been killed and 2,500 injured, according to state media. The quake is the strongest to hit the nation's center in more than a century, and despite many offers, the Moroccan government is only accepting aid from 4 countries: Spain, the UK, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Still, France announced today that it will give more than $5 million to NGOs operating in Morocco, and the Red Cross Society of China is donating $200,000 to the Moroccan Red Crescent. Morocco's King Mohammed has ordered that a relief commission be set up to distribute aid to survivors. Congress returns this week, facing a September 30th deadline to fund the government and avert a shutdown. The Senate gavelled back in at 3 p.m. today. They are scheduled to vote at 5:30 p.m. Eastern to advance the nomination of Tanya Bradsher to be the next Deputy VA Secretary. If confirmed, she'd be the first woman to serve in the department's second highest post. And during Leader Time remarks on the Senate floor today, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer previewed this week's schedule.
Finally, on appropes. This week, the bipartisan appropriations process continues here in the Senate. Tomorrow, we'll take the first procedural vote on a package of 3 appropriation bills: military construction, Veterans Affairs, agriculture, and transportation HUD. Earlier this year, Democrats and Republicans reached an agreement on next year's spending levels as part of our work to avoid default. These bills honor that agreement. Reaching bipartisan consensus on these bills certainly wasn't easy, and it took plenty of compromise, lots of negotiations, and understanding that neither side would get everything it wanted. But each of these bills received unanimous support in committee, these 3 bills, from Republicans and Democrats. So thanks to the leadership of Chair Murray, Vice Chair Collins, and appropriators from both sides, we're moving forward. This is what a functional legislative body looks like. Disagreements don't paralyze the process. Now, as we process these appropriations bills through the floor, Congress must also avoid a pointless government shutdown later this month. I cannot stress enough that bumbling into a shutdown right now would not only be entirely unnecessary, it would cause immense harm to the American people. It could undermine so much of the progress we've made to lower costs, grow our economy, and restore the tens of millions of jobs lost during the worst days of COVID. It would also derail Congress from our work on so many important things, like lowering the cost of insulin, prescription drugs, aiding our fellow Americans hurt by natural disasters, outcompeting the Chinese government, and so much more. All of this would be undermined by a government shutdown. We certainly don't need to go down that road. The Senate has shown that bipartisan compromise is entirely possible, even in these divided times. When the House gavels back into session tomorrow, I implore House Republicans to follow the Senate's example. Reject all-or-nothing tactics. Reject unrealistic extreme demands. Don't let 30 people way out on the extreme dictate what the House does. And instead, the House should work in a bipartisan fashion to keep the government open beyond September 30th. The only way we'll avoid a shutdown is through bipartisanship in both houses, and time is short to get it done.
Meanwhile, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said any funding agreement should include money to help U.S. allies in Europe support Ukraine in its battle against Russia.
So Republicans should welcome Democrats who are finally willing to spend money on our defense industrial base. Such a bipartisan consensus will not survive if we turn our backs on this conflict. And why would we pull the plug on a transatlantic alliance just when European allies are making credible investments in their own defenses and also coming around to share our concern about Chinese aggression? Competition with China is a global proposition, and the strength of our closest military and economic allies in Europe affects China's calculus. Beijing would love to see the transatlantic alliance fracture in the wake of America turning our back on our closest trading partner. If the United States proves we cannot be trusted to back our allies in Europe, why on earth should our allies in Asia expect different treatment in the face of Chinese aggression? So, Mr. President, war in Ukraine has taught the West a crucial lesson about the importance of investment in defense industrial capacity. And as I discussed last week, it's directed billions and billions of dollars toward restocking America's arsenal with American weapons built here by American workers. This is a fundamental prerequisite for competition with China, and we're accomplishing it using a tiny fraction of the historically small and insufficient defense budgets President Biden has sent up to Congress.
Part of today's Leader Time remarks from Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer before him. You can always see the Senate live on C-SPAN 2. It's also on cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. The House returns tomorrow at noon Eastern Time. They're also working on 2024 federal spending legislation, including for the Defense and Homeland Security departments. And with only weeks to go before government funding runs out, Politico budget and appropriations reporter Caitlin Emma says the possibility of a government shutdown remains real.
We are really no closer to that goal of averting a shutdown. A lot of people this time around feel like it might be more likely than not, just sort of given the dynamics here. You have a Senate that is, trying to pass a small package of bipartisan government funding bills, this week. Those bills have been already advanced out of committee largely along, bipartisan lines. And you have a House that is kind of in turmoil. You have Speaker McCarthy having to not walk a really narrow tightrope between his conservative, detractors and moderates who are both demanding different things. McCarthy is hoping to pass a few spending bills in the next couple weeks, but ultimately both sides are probably going to have to settle for some sort of short-term funding patch called a continuing resolution in order to keep the government open past October 1st and buy more time for negotiations. But, even that task this time around is, fraught with a number of different problems, and it's going to be really interesting to see how everything shakes out in the next 3 weeks.
All right, well, let's talk about the Senate first. Here, an article that you co-wrote in Politico with the headline, "Senate looks to get on the minibus." So explain specifically what's going on in the Senate and what we should expect from them.
Right. Well, as soon as today, possibly tomorrow, the Senate is expected to take its first procedural vote toward passing, what you just called a minibus. And that is essentially just a small package of government funding bills. So there are 12 government funding bills, and the Senate is hoping to pass 3 of the least controversial bills, through the upper chamber as soon as this week. So, what does that really accomplish? It really looks to buy Senate leaders a lot of leverage in this government funding standoff with the House. That would send a message saying, look at us. We have our, stuff together. We can pass bipartisan government funding bills. We're operating in regular order. This all stands in stark contrast to what is going on with House Republicans, which is just kind of a, chaotic mess. So as soon as this week, the Senate is going to try to take that step in passing 3 funding bills to send a message saying, hey, look, we have our stuff together. It's time for you to come to the table, come to your senses, stop making these crazy demands, and fund the government together.
And does that mean if it doesn't happen, that it's pretty much on the House? I mean, the House kind of politically takes the blame for not getting a deal?
I think in this case, the House would take a lot of the blame just because that's where so much of, the discontent lies. You have the Senate, the 2 women who are currently in charge of the Appropriations Committee, Senators Patty Murray and Susan Collins, are really hell-bent on, restoring like a regular order, bipartisan process, getting things done in a timely fashion. They're big on touting the fact that for the first time in 5 years, they've passed all of the spending bills out of committee largely along bipartisan lines. That stands in stark contrast to the House, where Speaker McCarthy is facing a real dilemma, that could possibly even jeopardize his speakership, if things go really poorly. He's got conservative members who are demanding spending cuts that are wildly unrealistic and far beyond the bills that they've already drafted. And you've got moderate members who are frustrated that the speaker keeps capitulating to these, conservative members. So, if anything is going to go wrong, it's probably going to go wrong in the House in terms of, what is McCarthy ultimately going to bring to the floor, and does he have enough votes to pass it?
Politico budget and appropriations reporter Caitlin Emma on this morning's Washington Journal. And starting this week, each morning at 7:15 Eastern Time, Washington Journal will give updates with the latest news on how federal funding negotiations are going. They'll also preview what to watch for during the day ahead. You can watch Washington Journal every morning starting at 7 a.m. Eastern Time on C-SPAN. You can stream it on cspan.org and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. That's also where you can get this program as a podcast. You can also find it on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And for more on the stories that are shaping Washington, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterikoff. Thanks a lot for listening today. We leave you where we started at today's 9/11 memorial ceremony at the Pentagon.